Oh, actually didn't even know that. That's
The last
fantastic.
one, take your notes.
I'm sorry?
Your last
Oh, yeah, it's doing that. Yeah, we just got the,
been around. Not your neck of the woods.
so.
On the wrong body of water. I know.
Well, good evening all. We'll call our meeting to order of the London Budget Committee on Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. This meeting is being recorded via Zoom. Cynthia Russis, member, is wherever you are. You're
No, just North Carolina.
okay, North Carolina. And as such, when we get to voting, it'll be roll call vote so that we can capture it correctly in that form, which means simply stating your name and your vote. Quickly, what we are going to do starts with what we're not going to do. We are not covering police and dispatch. Tried to communicate that via email to all persons. Cobb has had a day-long commitment and extending into this evening as well. And what we have done is we have moved that budget review to our November 15th, yes, November 12th meeting. Before we get to the select board report, Richard, I would like to point you to the materials that are in front of you. And starting from the back of your stack, there is an updated account of the police department and dispatch that replaces what is in your budget book. Dartmouth Health for the London Hospital provided more detail to their request. That is there where you review when we get to the committee associations and organization. And there's sort of an update on the Upper Valley, some of the Regional Planning Commission. The next piece you pack is in the London Fire Department, August 15, 2025 report that Jay Lyon put together regarding future staffing levels and his views and perspectives that has been reviewed by the select board. Welcome. Has been reviewed by the select board, and there are some also additional documents relative to call volumes and other data that will be shared in a later point. Then there is a budget packet for Tracy Memorial Library that Richard Petwell will be reviewing. There is a copy of the most recent iteration of the Clean Water State Development Funds loan that will be on our agenda shortly. And then there's a meeting schedule updated, reflecting the change of police and dispatch, and all other scheduled dates will stand for at least this time the way they are listed. So that updates your schedule. And then you should have a copy of the October 15th meeting minutes. There is also a schedule, which I don't know what to call it, but it reflects the valuations, how they're calculated, and for a group of nearby towns listed from Bow, Guilford, Grantham, Meredith, Moulton Borough, New London, Newbury, Plymouth, Sonny, and Wolfboro. And the
Which document is it? Sorry.
you're going to see it in your packet. It was probably four or five pages back in Excel spreadsheet. So if you can pull that out, I'm going to ask Lynn to review this with us and educate us relative to what this represents.
Right. I'm just gonna grab it. So what I did was, we always talk about the tax rate, based on our budget, and everybody wants to know how it affects the tax rate. So I put together this little chart. These are the towns that MRI, Municipal Resources, used for our wage study, and they determined that these are the towns in the state that are most like New London. They have a college, they have a hospital, they have similar demographics. So so that's why I chose those particular towns. And then basically I just utilized a report that I can get from DRA. And just went across the board with the columns that they had to just show where their tax rates landed. And as you can see, New London is not the highest, we're not the lowest. Our local count or our municipal tax rate also is not the highest or the lowest. So it just so that you guys had some context of other towns and what their tax rates are.
Sorry, if you need to finish.
No, go right ahead.
Just educate me on the county tax rate and why if you were living in the same county, should your county tax rate be the same? Or why are some towns in the same county have different? tax
That's a
rates?
good question. I don't know the answer to that, and I can find out if you'd like me to, because
Just curious.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that we
I
get
don't-
different services or what, but I will find out that question. Interestingly enough, Molten Borough has a, 5.65 tax rate. But Molten Borough has every house on the lake. They have, if you look at their valuation, head over to the first column, it's $7 billion. So that makes a difference in where your tax rate lands. They also have a lot of commercial. So that changes it. But I just thought it was something that interesting for everybody to look at and just to see where we land. I know we always often talk about, well, where are we in relation to Sunapee or Newbury or Sutton? But those towns aren't necessarily comparable to New London. So
So, sorry, to interrupt. To be fair, I look at this all day long as a residential lender and. Like these numbers are very meaningful when somebody is looking for a new home. I do tell them, I'm like, anything around Lake Sunapee, so any of the three towns, Sunapee, Newbury, New London. They are getting a far lower tax rate than Plymouth, Sutton, and Bradford. And it is because we benefit from those lake houses
bigger house.
and, and then our commerce here, so.
When I was buying a house,
Yeah.
we were before the Newbury house, or before the New London house, it was Newbury or Sutton. And our realtor said, well, it's the same mortgage payment. Do you want to pay down your equity? You want to pay taxes?
Yeah, well, I mean, but our house and such.
Nope.
But no, okay, all right.
We were getting a comparable house, but we were gonna
Yeah.
pay, what we were paying was going to be in taxes as opposed to equity. So,
Yeah.
it does matter. And again, it's just really, it's not gonna be used for anything as we go forward in budgeting, but it was just a reference so that we could see where we land in relation to other towns, so that you had something to compare it to. That was it for that.
Never mind, I'll keep my comments to the end. We should take care of the lakes though.
Other questions on that document? If not, let's move to.
That doesn't do anything.
minutes.
Windows.
I'll turn these off and then you guys can cut them. Do you guys want a window open?
Crack ones?
Sure.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Thank you.
Anything that cools down.
Sorry, I was late. I couldn't get in any of the doors, but the bell rang, the toll in the church rang. 6, so I was like.
Yeah.
It's weird, because we unlocked that one. I know, I was.
Oh.
I know.
If you'd be kind enough to refer to your copy of the minutes for the October 15th meeting. I'd indicated in the email I was not going to share a copy with you because we had made announcements based on input from some committee members. And in an effort to try to save paper, that effort has failed for at least this step. Karen and I spoke earlier this afternoon. She has 2 adjustments to the meeting minutes that she would like to motion. Karen, if you would be so kind.
And I apologize, that was the most late catch. And the first one we talked about, actually, we're all set. The minutes is accurate. I went back and refreshed myself on it and we're good. So I'll let that stand. So the only change then is on page 2 under the MS 535 review, the second bullet, last sentence. As it currently reads, it shows, however, this was the reason the study of dispatch services was delayed. I think, the conversation and discussion around that was around the Department of Public Works building.
Correct.
The October 15th.
Correct. I said nothing about this.
Right. So I would just make a motion that the sentence out read, however, this was the reason the study on the Department of Public Works building was delayed.
Okay. Any other adjustments to the minutes by any other members? I need a motion, Karen, if you would make it, please, to adopt that.
Second,
I'll make the motion. I will make the motion.
I second.
to-
Will likes the second.
sorry, I second, you're too late.
Oh, you
All
did
right,
already.
Lou, you're the second. All right, we will vote,
Ducks.
to, we need it now, I guess the other motion is to be to accept the minutes as amended.
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes as amended on October 15th, 2025.
Thank you, Lucy.
Second.
Lou, you want your name bright lights.
All right, Lou beat you to the buzzer again. So in accord with our requirements, given a recorded session, please vote by stating your name and your vote in regards to the motion made on our minutes.
Cynthia's on Zoom,
Yeah.
just for Ken and yes.
Cynthia, would you vote, please?
Cynthia?
Cynthia, you there?
Cynthia, are you there?
Sorry, I had myself muted, yes. Cynthia Russis votes yes.
Thank you.
I for Lou Bowden.
Aye for Megan Brown. Aye for Ken Og.
I for Karen Epstein.
Anderson, yes.
Lindsay Lund, yes.
Charles Kelsey, yes,
Chris Lorio, yes.
approved, adopted. No, and thank you. Okay. Use the effort. I will pass the microphone to Mr. Anderson, if you would be so kind to give us a select board update report.
Thank you, Charlie. So last Thursday night, we had a marathon 3.5 hour meeting. Reviewing the budget. We didn't even finish. And so we decided it would be fun to get together this morning at 7:30 and add another 2 hours onto that. The first thing that before I get into the budget issues that I would just want to mention, the first thing that we had at our meeting last Thursday night was we had a presentation from the water precinct. And as you folks know, the water precinct is a completely separate municipal body. We don't have any jurisdiction over them. That being said, they made an interesting presentation about what they believe is going to be necessary to increase the capacity of the water precinct. And it gets into a very interesting philosophical conversation, if you will, about what are the responsibilities of the town when it comes to potentially increasing our water capacity. Obviously, we have a lot of folks who are on wells, but we have a lot of folks who are customers of the water precinct. Specifically, they were talking about over the coming years, what would be rather extensive work to increase capacity by adding additional wells, potentially at Colby Point, and other things in an effort to ramp up capacity. The short, the sort of the Reader's Digest version is that the various elements of these projects, these different things that they would want to do, they're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, in round numbers, $5 million to do that. The problem for them is I think realistically, they do have a real challenge. If they were to ask all of the customers of the water precinct to bear that entire cost, it makes it very difficult. And the argument can be made by the customers of, we have water. We don't, we're not getting anything particular by increasing the capacity of the system. I mean, that's great that you want to be able to add additional properties and potentially additional developments or whatever. But that's not our issue. And I think that's a reasonable way that they can view that. There's also another argument to be made that people are saying, look, you know, whatever the water precinct wants to do is not ultimately something that is town's responsibility, because we don't own or operate or really have any say over what the water precinct does. And so it's sort of, you know, they threw this out there of a rather lengthy presentation. And it's going to be interesting because, you know, it's there's well known many other significant expenditures coming down the pike at us. And we just didn't need somebody to say, well, here's another $5 million to throw on your list of capital bills to pay. But at the same time, again, you know, for example, additional housing is important to us. And if making sure that we never run into any capacity issues are important, it's something that I think the town's going to have to look at and consider. And it really, to me, it raised a lot of really interesting sort of, as I said, for lack of a better phrase, philosophical questions. What are the responsibilities of the town to increase capacity to the water? So, and I'll just throw that out there for you folks to be aware of. We then moved on from there into, I'm sorry, Lynn, I'm blanking. We had another presentation.
SB2.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Great to have wingmen, you know. An interesting conversation from the folks who were tasked with examining whether or not the town should consider moving to an SB2 format, as opposed to a traditional town meeting. It was a very interesting conversation. They laid out a lot of different pros and cons for both. And I think that's what was interesting about it is I don't think it's not an obvious answer, I think. You look at potential advantages. What is interesting is that the school district, while not technically a completely SB2 organization, is much more towards SB2 than towards New London's town meeting model. And what's interesting, you know, there's an argument to be made. They were suggesting that by going to an SB2 model, we would increase participation. The problem is that, you know, having been on the NBC for the school district for 18 years, we have generally no one show up at our deliberative session in January. It is typically a very sparsely populated audience, with one notable exception being this past January when we turned up more than 1,500 people. But that's to say that's an outlier is putting it mildly. And so they sort of laid out for us these options, and I think, you know, it was in a way similar to the water precinct presentation. It was kind of like, you know, for your consideration, for you to think about. But again, similar to the water precinct presentation, I would suggest not necessarily a clear answer as to, you know, they were making arguments for both sides of it. But I would say certainly, you know, thoughts that it increases participation, I think is questionable when I look at the traditional deliberative session for the school district. From there, we moved on into the budget presentations. And I'm not going to bore you folks with everything that we discussed in terms of all the different issues. And actually, please feel free to weigh in at any time to kind of elaborate on anything I'm saying, if you wouldn't mind. Sure. And Lynn, I would say the same thing as well, please. But in reviewing the budget, it was sort of, if you will, the biggest thing of all that was an issue, if you will, was Chief Lyons' request to add an additional person to the fire department's roles, with the intention of then adding another person next year. And that would be basically adding a 5th full-time paid person, and then next year, an additional 6th full-time person. And the select board took issue with that. I was probably, if you will, the point man on that. In terms of, you know, I've sat through numerous presentations by the chief on his rationale. And I do think it's important to state, and I've said this many times, and I'll continue to state this, I have no doubt what the chief was saying was accurate. And his assertion that by adding 2 additional full-time firefighters, it will be a better fire department, a stronger fire department, that's absolute truth. The difficulty for us is both here on NBC as well as on the select board. We could say that about most expenditures. If we do this, it's going to make a better rec department, make a better police department, will make a better DPW. And trying to weigh that. One of the things certainly that weighs on my mind is the fire department budget has gone from $333,000 in 2019 to what was proposed was approximately $1,080,000 in 2027. And over 9 years to see the budget more than triple is problematic. Now, that being said, that's also because we're talking about moving to an entirely different way of handling our fire department. As some of you might know, I was on the fire department for 12 years, and I have enormous respect for all of the women and men who are on that department and the work that they do. And I think candidly, that's why I think many of them perhaps find my position very disappointing. But I can't support any additional personnel at this time. And I think the rest of the select board was essentially on the same page. We did take that issue up again this morning. And in addressing the issue of the fire department, one of the things I proposed, and we did do, is we add $25,000 into the budget for several different things. One of which would be currently the fire department stands at, we have a roster of 35 personnel. We have a maximum of 45 that we can have on the department. I was suggesting that anything we can do to pick up those 10 extra slots, even if the average firefighter is only responding to 2 calls per month, that's still 20 more responses per month that you could get. And so we were suggesting part of that money could be used for things as simple as an occasional ad in the Kearsarge Shopper, literally a physical sign in front of the fire station saying, volunteers needed, please call the following number, that kind of thing. And one of the things that we also did, one of the things we talked about with this additional sum of money would be, for example, one of the things that was brought up to us was a concern that we only have 5 EMTs on the fire department. If all of the rescue squad rigs, and we currently staff 2 generally at all times, if they're all tied up with other things, they're manned by EMTs. If they're busy with something and we dispatch the fire department to a call, sometimes we don't have an EMT who's responding.
And so they can't do anything. A general firefighter who shows up at a call for emergency measures, there's a physical emergency, they cannot touch that individual. Which was new information that.
Well, insofar as I would say, for example, using any of the equipment that an EMT would utilize, they can't do that. For that reason, for example, one of the things we touched on this morning was we found out, which I was not aware of. I thought we paid the full cost. If a firefighter wants to become an EMT, we pay a portion of it. And so the idea was to use part of this $25,000 to pay the entire cost, whatever it costs, which is approximately $2,000 apparently for the course. We will cover that. In addition, we currently pay for anyone who wants to undergo firefighter 1 or firefighter 2 training. We pay the entire cost of that. But what I had proposed, and I think folks were somewhat enthusiastic, it depends who you ask, would be that if someone wants to take firefighter 1 training, if they're still at the conclusion of that, if a year later they're still in the fire department, we would cut them a check for $200. And it's simply to provide a little thank you, if you will, for someone being willing to up their skill level and to stay on the department. And then similarly, offering what would be a $1,000 stipend to anyone who becomes an EMT. That a year later, if they're still in the department, we would then give them a check for $1,000. No particular requirements beyond just sticking it out for a year afterwards on the department. The goal there being, again, to simply have personnel better trained to better handle things. Things like, instead of having 5, maybe we'll have 8 EMTs on the department instead of 5. I don't know. One of the other things we talked about was using some of that money to potentially increase the stipends on the weekends and on the evenings. We currently pay $180 for a Saturday and $180 for a Sunday for the officer on call. She or he has to be available to be the officer in charge if we get toned. What my argument was, for every dollar we increase that stipend, then that increases the potential that people will turn out, or being willing to sign up, I should say, for the weekend shift, for example. Especially if you're planning on being home anyway, cutting the grass and working on the property, you can pick up some additional money. And so one of the things I said to the chief was if we made $10,000 on Saturday and $10,000 on Sunday, and before I could even finish, the deputy chief said, I'll take them. And I said, exactly. With every dollar we increase it, the potential that someone's going to want to sign up for those shifts is going to increase. And so again, some of that money would be available for the chief to potentially increase the stipends that we pay for evenings and weekends. The whole goal being essentially to try to ameliorate some of the problems that we're having in terms of turnout for personnel and having people being willing to sign up to take an evening shift or weekend shift, but not take on the cost of, I'm sorry, Lynn, what was it for one firefighter? 110,000?
About $110,000 with,
Yeah.
all told, salary, retirement, FICA, all that.
Yes,
About
so
100.
in round numbers, we're looking at $110,000 per year currently for that additional firefighter. That $110,000 pays for a lot of additional things that we can do, both to increase the size of the personnel roster on the department, increase the training, increase the potential that people are willing to sign up, et cetera. So that was one of the things we threw out there. But as I said, in the end, and as far as the additional firefighter, we declined to do that. In addition, we also asked the chief, and he was willing to push off the purchase of an additional vehicle at a cost of approximately $80,000 for at least 1 year, so that we were shifting that to next year's budget. So we're not going to be looking to do that. We then moved on to other topics. Most of them, in the scheme of things, candidly, relatively modest in terms of their significance to the budget. But it was things as basic as, for example, we provide, I believe it is $12,500 a year for the Chamber of Commerce.
1,500 is what we have been giving.
15,000.
Sorry, 15,000 is what they've been asked.
Is what they asked.
And
Right.
so we've been funding that at 15,000 for the past few years. But we've now made a change, a suggested change.
Oh, I thought you were just declining to increase it.
No, they asked for 15,000, which is what they've been asking
Yeah,
for
well, we
the
can
past
say
several years and receiving.
Oh,
And
really?
we
We have
said-
been getting 15. Okay.
1 year,
Yes.
they had 15,000 the year before. So it was 12,500 in 2024. It was 15 in 2025, and now they wanted the 15 again.
And so, for example, a relatively modest point, but there we did inquire that none of the other towns contribute anything to the Chamber of Commerce. And in fact, we've asked the Chamber of
Yes.
Commerce to ask for support from the other towns, which they've declined to do. And so we decided, well, we're not increasing your budget as per your request. We're just leaving it where it is. And maybe you want to start asking other people for additional funds.
Yes.
And it is not, to be clear, it is not that we don't value the work of the Chamber of Commerce and think it's important in terms of promoting our local businesses, et cetera. But again, I think it's fair to suggest that cost should be shared by all the towns that participate, not just New London. And then finally, I think perhaps the most important thing that we addressed this morning was the issue of a COLA. As I think you folks know, the current system automatically, well, I shouldn't say automatically, but it does provide for a 2.5% increase, what is referred to as a step increase. That is ostensibly merit-based, but it was pointed out that out of 45 employees, 45 full-time employees, 44 of them received their full step last year. And so at 2.5%, the concern that some of us had was that adding an additional COLA on top of that, the CPI for the next 12 months is projected to be somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5%. The fact of the matter is that with Trump's tariff policy, it's a really big guess as to where the economy is going to be in 12 months. But the fact is that that's what the CPI is estimated right now, somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5%. And so BB was of the opinion that we should give a COLA of 3% plus the 2.5% step for a total of 5.5%.
And then take this year to
Right.
really look at our compensation in terms of step and COLA and put some parameters around that. Newberry is going through their own wage study, which they've never done, so they're showing that for the first time. They are also taking a year and waiting to communicate any changes to employees for at least a year.
But my understanding is that Newbury is doing a 3% increase this year.
Yeah, possibly. I have too many numbers in my head right now to confirm that,
In my
but
recollection
they are
is, for
doing
example,
something.
Newbury's doing it, they don't have a step program. they're doing
Yes, they don't have a step
3%
program. That is true.
total. And so our thought process was if we add a 1.5% COLA on top of a 2.5% step. And, you know, candidly, I find this idea of slicing and dicing a raise into different parts somewhat problematic for me philosophically, but the point is, at the end of the day, it would result in a 4% increase for our employees. And certainly, at least Janet and I voted that that was a reasonable number. Because again, what we're trying to do is get our arms around a budget that has been increasing at very significant rates year after year after year, that and forgive me, it becomes something of an endless drone on my part, but I keep saying it's not sustainable. And so instead, a 4% increase I thought was quite a reasonable, fair number based on what the CPI is looking at for the next 12 months. And again, is trying to kind of keep our overall budget number somewhat under control. And so with all that said, and I don't know after the changes in the reserves, but Lynn, did you by any chance calculate with the operating budget where we came in after?
I have not done that. That happened today. But the reason it's separated into the two pieces is because they only get the 2.5% on their anniversary date.
Right.
So for example, somebody whose anniversary is in, say, June, I have a town DPW worker. She won't get a 4% raise. She will get a 1.5% raise, and then at the end of June, she'll get that 2.5%. So that it was done that way because when they did the wage study in 2018, it was too expensive to do it. We used to get raises all at once in July. It was too expensive to implement everything all at once. So then they started, oh, well, on each anniversary date, they'll put them into the right percentile, but that's why it is split out the way it is. Just a little history on that.
Right.
That's why we separate steps and COLA.
Just so everyone knows, COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. It's pretty easy like that now.
And so that's kind of where we're at in terms of, you know, our proposed COLA in addition to the step for a total of about 4%. And that, as I said, everything else is kind of relatively, you know, I mentioned, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, simply because that was an interesting example to me of where, you know, we said, you know, we believe it's time for other towns to step up and do something. In a similar vein, I think one could say the same argument about the fire department, for example. And, you know, the fact literally of all the contiguous towns around us, they have exactly 0 full-time firefighters. We have 4 full-time firefighters currently, and we've elected to stick at 4% for the time. I'm sorry, 4 full-time firefighters at this time. And again, part of it is also because I think it's important. Again, we're looking down the road and we say we've got a DPW project coming at us. We've got a new police station coming at us. And we just found out that that the water precinct is asking for, or let's put it this way, it's asking us to consider significantly supporting a $5 million project. And that when I asked them, what do you envision as the town's contribution to this $5 million? They said, well, we'd like to see you consider supporting all of it. And, you know, so again, these are not trivial amounts that we're looking at as potential costs. So forgive me for going on so long, but obviously we had a lengthy meeting last week and another lengthy one this morning.
And we'll continue to have, we have not approved the full budget yet, so we'll have another session.
And also, if I might add, as far, you know, in my role on the MBC for the school district, you know, we're coming in at a fairly modest overall increase for the school district. But again, you know, our taxpayers, again, they don't care how we slice and dice it. They care what that ultimate tax bill is. They don't care that part of it is the county, part of it is the town and the money, part of it is the school district, et cetera. They're worried about what that overall rate is. And I can tell you, fortunately for the school district, we're coming in at a fairly, what I'd suggest is a reasonable rate. So,
Thank you.
with all that, too much talking.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a question, basically. I don't wanna like dive into the fire department because I think that's what we're supposed to do a little bit today, right?
No.
But in regards to the water precinct, before we expand, what's the state of the current system itself? Like, do we have wooden pipes somewhere, or like, are we maintaining it before we even think to expand it? Or even consider it? Is it being properly maintained? I'm literally at, like, that's, you know.
Yeah, it is being maintained. I think what is in question is at what level is it being has it been maintained? But they have said that they have been
I'll be done. in just a
maintaining
minute.
it.
Yeah.
But all the reports are on our town website as well, so they've made everything 1,000%.
I just, that's from my perspective, from the budget, from the board of selectmen too, is like, I wanna know what the state of the current one is first, before we go debating this on an existential level in the first place.
I think, Lindsay, if the report that was generated by Karen and myself
Mhm.
after extensive discussion with the water precinct, we left with confidence that they're doing a very good job managing the system.
Was not in any way, very not.
No, and that it's a very legitimate question. We also left with an understanding and sense that they're pretty frugal in terms of what they do and how they do it. They're not overstaffed. So in terms of personnel and actual resources they employ on maintenance of the system, seem to be very appropriate and very up to date. And there's no reason that we have to question it. They did a study of leaks in the system and did find two. They were minor in nature, so that's reflective of maintaining a system in good order, and ensuring minimal amount of water loss, which was the hope that maybe that would discover something that would increase capacity, but in reality, it is not going to do that.
Maybe I should preface, don't necessarily read into why I asked.
Well, no, I think it's important.
Yeah, and we can just, I'm sorry, I need to read the report too, clearly, I apologize.
I'd like to add too.
Yeah.
Last year's Main Street project was about a $5 million project. So the water line on Main Street was replaced. So that was a pretty extensive project, and of course, the ratepayers have just taken on that service over the past year.
Yeah.
So that was a major maintenance,
They did say on Thursday that they did come in under.
a little under,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So,
coming under
but it's
and
still, the
It's not-
project has not been closed.
Correct, the end of
So there's-
November.
There's still more
Yeah.
to be seen.
What about the
without
side?
any-
Well, no.
any-
You know, if I could
additional
just
work.
add to that, Karen, I think it's a good point to bring up. Because what's interesting about that is that project services the existing customers. And so, for example, to ask the existing customers to bear the cost of that project, which ironically is roughly about the same amount of money, is interesting. Whereas, their feeling was, if you want us to do this, to increase capacity, we can do it. But we don't think it's fair to ask the current customers. That's the interesting part of this.
But you would
If I
ask,
may though, I've only had like 30 seconds to talk, just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you guys are good. I just have a couple of questions. I get it, and I think that's a huge review. I was just asking questions. The other question I had was, as far as like the fire department and you guys agreeing with him to take out a budget item before he presents it to us too. It's just sort of an order of operations or maybe, and I'm not fussing at you, but I'm just like, what do we, is that fair? I mean, but amongst the procedure.
Yeah, that's procedure.
That's what we've normally done is,
Right, but we also have a history of people adding it back in when they get to us too.
sure, if Jay wants to come and make a plea for us and the budget committee decides to add it back in, that's our prerogative.
Oh, isn't that what we're doing on the 12th? Yes, when fire.
so procedurally, for all members, new and old, the process that we've used is to have department budget reviews. Some of this is concurrent with the select board review. Ultimately, the select board is charged with arriving at an operating budget for the town that they approve. The budget committee is obligated by our process and structure to come up with a budget. We use the budget, of the select board contextually, but this committee has a responsibility to develop its own budget. That budget may materially differ from the select board budget. In the event that that occurs, then there is a reconciliation process that we would undertake. And that would help us arrive at whatever the warrant article is that is represented to the town for town meeting. Historically, the budget committee budget and the select board budget have been the same. Other than one minor difference last year, which was a net difference of $1,000 given to the garden club by the budget committee, and the select board didn't. So that's procedurally how we will do this. So these presentations and dialogues with department heads are discovery and intended to help us inform. We will make a final budget deliberation, discussions and decisions at the end of this process, not when we're in a meeting next with the fire chief. We will hear his representation and his viewpoints, and we will in turn come to our own conclusions, which may differ from what the select board has done.
My question is, have we ever, and I know my loyalty to the town of London is unquenchable in this field, but have we ever thought about synergistic effects of the regional fire department?
We are beginning those conversations. That idea has been floated. Seemingly Chief Lyon is open to exploring that. But it has been brought up more recently in the past few weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lou, that you touched on that, because you're exactly correct. I mean, it is one of the things, it's, the idea is we have a mutual aid agreement with the other towns, et cetera. Why don't we make it a little bit more formal and perhaps get some real benefits of basically, and candidly, you know, from our standpoint, have the other towns share some of this burden. If we're going to have full-time firefighters, why shouldn't they be contributing to the cost of it?
Yeah, indeed.
And so it's interesting, and you know, the real challenge there is, candidly, I just think when you've got people who are the chiefs of departments all around, and now there's gonna be one chief, people get very territorial.
When you were talking, I just did just off, you know, a wagon. The price of the ladder truck now can go up to $2 million.
Yeah.
And I am wondering how many of the other towns would forego the purchase of one, thinking that there's a Grand Poobah in London that can do that. And I'm not trying to be trite, but when you have people saying, "Oh, they got it, so we don't need to do it," and I think it's if we're gonna pay the piper, you know, it's got to be fair. And I think that, you know, that's why I would encourage to consider those at the executive level.
I think it's a great point, though. I mean, that's exactly, I think that's a fair concern to have, is I think it's reasonable that people will say, London's got this.
Well, so I think
Dispatch might be another one.
that's something fair that then we can ask Chief to speak to,
Yes.
is because I'm sure that he has an like an understanding of what, you know, resources and assets the other, like the surrounding towns have. So to say like, you know, are they leaning on us for something unreasonably?
To piggyback on what you're saying too, is you can't just keep giving them stuff and then nobody will run it either. Especially on after 7 and on the weekends. That's
I would like to, I am proposing to this budget committee that in the course of our deliberations, we generate a set of recommendations beyond what is in the actual operating budget that we would share with the select board and share with the town administrator. Specifically, you could say, for example, we recommend a deep exploration or a greater exploration of what the pros, cons, and potential are of regionalized police, fire resource and department. and to include what that might do to mutual aid agreements, both financially and in terms of service delivery. We might also recommend that we start to look at tri-town or regional capital expenditure budgets. For example, if we buy a grader costing $600,000 and we use that grader part of the year, but not all of the year, and Springfield needs a grader, potentially we could become more creative in how both we finance it and how the asset gets ultimately utilized. So those are just two examples of what we might come forward with that would be helpful as these iterations of consideration come forward on how do we get better, smarter, and more efficient collectively versus singularly New London bearing the brunt of all of these expenditures. So that's a recommendation I am making, and I will be happy to populate a straw man of ideas and have the committee consider that during our process. But I'd ask you all to also.
Do you want to do that as a motion or you want to do that as
No,
a,
it's
just
a-
a notion? It's a notion.
It's a recommendation only. I'm not gonna take it as a motion.
The notion, I like that.
Yeah, it's a sort of motion. So I thank you. It sounds like you've got a full plate of opportunities and concerns.
I'm still a little worried because I don't have a meeting scheduled for my anniversary tomorrow.
What are you gonna do? Bring an apple and some candy. I'd like to move this one.
Oh, yeah, if I could just add one
Yeah.
last thing, if you don't mind.
Please.
One thing I do want you to be aware, one thing we did also change this morning was we did beef up some of the money that we had been originally planning on putting into capital reserves. We knocked some of those numbers up a little bit higher, just to try to make sure that, you know, as I already mentioned to you folks, you had a nerve from you, and Lynn mentioned that she was down to $18,000 at the end of the fiscal year. That's a really, really tight budget, and it just doesn't seem to me fair to our staff to ask them to run with that little extra runway. And so that's where, you know, I was completely comfortable with trying to make sure we've got money in reserve for different things that might come up. And so we did bump those numbers up just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just mumbling over here.
It's okay, John.
We were at
Well,
just a little bit of.
How do you put something in capital reserves that doesn't have a reason for the account to be?
Oh, these accounts all have a reason to be.
All the accounts do.
Yeah, and we were just bumping some of them up a little bit to try to make sure we don't run into a scenario in which Lynn and her colleagues are all stuck trying to make the numbers work in the last 2 months of the fiscal year. If we have an emergency.
Yeah, but you know, can you take money from capital reserve for an emergency?
Yeah,
You can.
they are agents to expend. So if, as someone pointed out, if the boiler at the fire department blows up, we don't have to have the firefighters take cold showers for 3 months. We can then pull it out of town building capital reserve to make that repair.
Okay.
If we don't have it in the operating budget.
Right,
But we couldn't pull from, let's just say, a sidewalk capital
Right.
reserve.
right. So, yeah, that's what. I
Correct.
was-
That's where you were correct in that, minute. That can't happen, but you can fall
Got a
within.
little crap.
No slush fund.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Money can be.
And I'll get those updated numbers out to you guys. It's just the meeting happened this morning, rolled back into my office at about 10 o'clock, so it's not ready at this point. But I'll get a new summary sheet out to you. I will get the other report out to you when they land on things. I don't want to keep printing reports that are just changing. Karen asked that we add back the column that compares the actuals from 23 to the budget for 27 into the report, and I can do that. I've already done it. I want to land on some numbers
Thank you,
before
Lynn.
I
That's terrific.
start throwing paperwork at you guys, and then you're sitting there going, all right, which one am I supposed to be looking at? So,
Kind of along those lines, with these changes, I think we discussed this last year, there were multiple versions as well. When the changes are made, can we get, I think we had, as I discussed it, a change page, so we
I'm
know.
keeping a running list,
perfect.
so
Thank you.
I'll attach that with the summary
Thank
page
you.
so that you can see which ones are up and down. And when I give you the summary, what I'm gonna do now is I will highlight those lines that have not been voted on by the select board yet, so you'll know which ones have been approved by them and which ones are still not approved.
And Charlie, the last thing I'll say in conclusion, I swear, Chris and Charlie, this will be my conclusion, I think. But I'll just say this, I really am eager to hear what all of you are going to think about these different choices. Because, you know, if two heads are better than one, I really do believe that when it comes to the MVC for the town, 12 heads will be better than 3. So I'll be looking forward to any of your thoughts.
I'd like to move to the Pleasant Lake Protection Association. Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan, and John, and please feel free to present. I will leave it to you. Everybody has a copy of the most recent iteration, and I believe have read it, and if not, you'll give us a snapshot.
I was gonna start off by saying, well, first, I'm Doug Baxter, president of Pleasant Lake Protective Association, but to change the tone a little, we are not asking for any money.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, that's right. The pipeline.
It's sure, but.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you'd all agree that Pleasant Lake is a jewel of a lake and a real asset to our community and to the town of New London. The results of our water testing that we've been doing through what we call our VLAP program, which we conduct 5 times a year in about 12 different locations around the lake. The results have always been very healthy with regard to the parameters that DES puts out. So we are a healthy looking lake, but sadly, the lake has experienced cyanobacteria blooms in the last few years. Some of these blooms have been substantial and were located at the town beach and the boat launch, closing the beach. Fortunately, they were short-lived, but unfortunately, we're not sure exactly what the mechanism is that's leading to these occurrences. Because of this and other concerns that Pleasant Lake Protective Association has about maintaining the quality of the lake, it had initiated contact first with Colby Sawyer College, who conducted, under Nick Baer's direction, a year-long survey of the lake and its tributaries. Most recently, we have begun work with an environmental engineering firm called FB Environmental from Portland, Maine, to learn what solutions might be applied to address any water quality issues. Our testings with FBE in September were for deep water core sampling on the bottom sediments and also for dissolved oxygen, so we could better understand what involvement materials in the depths of the lake may be playing. We are currently awaiting these results. What we've come to realize is that we need a complete analysis of what is going on in and around the lake in the form of an engineering study, which ultimately becomes a watershed management plan. Many New Hampshire lakes have gone through this with the assistance of an environmental engineering firm such as FB Environmental. The cost for one of these plans is typically about $100,000 and takes about 18 to 24 months to complete. In the past, there have been grants available to pay for these plans. However, these grants are presently very limited in size and availability. But John would like to present another possible solution.
My apologies to Rich and Ashley and those who suffered through this. Anyway, what is available is a loan called a Clean Water State Revolving Funds loan. This is a loan for which we can apply through the town. The loans are funded by the federal and the state governments together. The nominal interest rate is 1%. When the watershed management plan is completed, usually within 2 years, but as many as 5 years, the loan is forgiven. The cost of PLPA, who would be paying the interest on this, would be between $1,000 and $5,000 for a $100,000 loan. In short, $1,000 would most likely get Pleasant Lake $100,000 to pay for the plan. PLPA would be responsible for the interest costs. These loans can only be offered to municipalities, not to lake associations. The municipalities in this case would be the nominal recipients of the loan. They are invoiced usually monthly by the company creating the plan, perhaps this FB that we're talking about, the environmental that we're talking about. The town, together with PLPA, would review the invoices along with a finance officer. And upon their approval, the invoices would be submitted to the state for a disbursement from the loan to the town, which would then in turn pay the company creating the plan. again, and we underline this, there would be no cost to the town at all. Before the loan can be secured, the town would need to vote in favor of a warrant article which would appropriate the $100,000. The warrant article would definitely spell out that there would be no financial obligation to the New London taxpayer. We have sample warrant articles which other towns have approved. Pleasant Lake Protective Association would guarantee the repayment of the loan in the event that the terms of the loan were not met and the loan could not be forgiven. A very unlikely event. This could be spelled out in a warrant article also. So we need your help. The select board has agreed that giving us this assistance at no cost to the town benefits the entire town, and that they will bring forward and support a warrant article for the appropriation of this loan at the March 2026 town meeting. Now we are asking for the budget committee support for this same article. I want to just ad lib just a little as I'm sitting here, and we're competing for these funds. And you compete with them by being timely, but you also compete by having your ducks in a row. And one of the most important of the ducks is the warrant article. And so the sooner that we can say we have a warrant article, it doesn't have to be an approved one yet. We can say that we have a warrant article. This gives us points, and they told us how many points it was, but it doesn't matter because I don't know how many points you need to win the race in the first place. But so this is sort of pushing the schedule here, but as soon as we can get you and the select board, and Ashley says hopefully in this coming month before Thanksgiving, we have a written article that satisfies everybody, make sure that there's no liability for the town. We would like to have you people recommend the article. And we would like the select board, of course, to recommend it. Hopefully they will, because I think they're producing it. And we're also getting Nick Bear, the health office, to throw in their recommendation on it. So we're asking for your help. We think it's to the benefit of the town. The town down in Elkins, of course, has a beach. And it has a playground. And so it's and that's where these blooms seem to be collecting. So we want to help the town, but we also want to help the lake. And any questions you might have, I think the one concern that Rich mentioned when we first came up with this was what would be the liability to the town if, for instance, FB Environmental didn't have the plan done within 2 years. When we turned out it can be up to 5 years. And even with arguing, it can be more than that. But the point is that Pleasant Lake would guarantee the loan. So that and then people say, well, why don't you just pay and get the plan in the first place? Another thing that FB told us was that most of these plans are costing $100,000. But most of them are requiring close to $1 million worth of remediation afterwards. We've got a fair war chest down there in the lake. But if we can get this $100,000 or $1,000, this gives us a lot more to fight the battle with. So. Anyway,
I was just gonna add too, those aren't familiar with this, town of Sutton is done this already, and Kezar Lake. Yeah, Kezar Lake is halfway through the development of their watershed management plan. And this FB Environmental comes very highly recommended from lakes in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. They've had a lot of experience with this, and we've been very impressed with their professionalism and their timely service.
I have a question for you, and it's good, because I vote yes, but, liability, I would, liability wise, though, for the town, and this is where I want to make sure it's clear, should it be something related to the beach or the septic systems over there or whatever? Are we prepared? I mean, we should be, we have to. I mean, that's our tax base. We just went through that, but,
We're talking about financial liability.
right, financial liability is what I want to make sure you're.
If this loan does not do everything it's supposed to do,
Mhm.
and be forgiven, we don't want the town on the hook for that. That's,
No, not the loan for that,
Yeah.
but the discovery from what we're paying for the study.
yeah. Okay, I'm not quite,
I think she's saying if there's
We
if they
discovered,
discover something like there's a sewage issue and the town has to remediate that sewage issue, that could cost $1 million. Are we prepared as a town to do that?
well, I think
Which is we don't know.
that's another story,
Right.
but I think that becomes the town's problem. Right now, for instance, at Elkins Beach, the town is doing a remediation project where we were having a lot of, at the beach, we were having a lot of erosion problems and so forth. And so Sam and his gang been down there doing a lot of work around the playground area, the beach house, and down at the actual beach, restoring the wall and extending dry wells and things like that. So if the town has a problem down there, we're gonna expect the town to take care of it.
like, don't read into why I asked the question. Just asking.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Who is the actual borrower? Is it the town?
The municipality is, yeah.
And in terms of the association being able to guarantee the loan, God forbid, need be. So you're saying there's enough in reserves held by the Pleasant Lake
Yeah,
Association to make that guarantee?
Yes.
yeah.
And so these representations will be made in the warrant. But in terms of the loan documentation, what, who would we be signing on with the state? This,
State,
the,
yeah,
okay.
DES
So this
does all the
guarantee, would-
documentation, and to a certain extent, they negotiate the contracts. Guess the feeling I'm getting is that we could say we're sort of like FB, so they might choose them to be.
oh, okay, so the state actually determines who the.
Yeah, but it
consultant
sounds
is?
like FB has been their vendor of choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they've got a really good working relationship with FB.
It's an interesting thing, because, I don't know how much to say here, but we've gotten to talk to people at DES now, and there's actually a person assigned to a case like ours, and they're extremely helpful, friendly, and very positive. And so, but they also say, get that warrant article.
Mhm.
Man, that's the biggest thing I keep saying. They've written it and everything, but get the warrant article. And then, if you get that, you've got a real head start.
Mhm.
And, we want so much to make this lake, or, want the cyanobacteria thing to go away.
Mhm.
And it just seems so inconsistent why it's there, because we're a clean lake number wise, and it's just,
It's those kids in this.
it's a mystery.
Unlock the bathrooms, people.
Another-
Quick question. So outside of the cyanobacteria, I'm assuming they're looking at everything. It's not just
They are.
this issue. It's a full.
Yes,
Okay, great. Because if they find something else, obviously, like.
runoff is the number one challenge.
Yeah,
As you well know, we've got a lot of tributaries.
Yeah.
The study that Colby Sawyer did for us was very revealing. I mean, it really told us a lot. And so that's helped us plan some of our actions. Well, the Elkins Beach project is one example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it comes at a very opportune town in our town's history, if you want to say that. For one, as you may know, FEMA is going into watershed management plans. And as a matter of fact, the new flood zones are predicated on watershed for the entire watershed. As a backup, I may, the Stafford Act, section 402 actually allows federal funds to be spent for watershed management projects. Those are on a competitive system, but I would, if you don't mind, if that's what you guys mind, I'll call Jill Pawlowski, our senior field director, tomorrow and see if we can, I'm not saying to replace your plan, but I think it would be a good opportunity to look at what else can.
Yeah, I would add, if you can do it surreptitiously, we had a suggestion of another source too, but it wouldn't provide the same situation.
Yeah.
And, this one has such a positive response right now.
Let's put it this way, you go do your thing, and if you are not getting anywhere, then come and talk to us and we'll scrub the ground. The other thing too is that with watershed management, the fact that there is cyanobacteria means there's runoff or perhaps unmaintained sewer or unmaintained septic tank systems, and that would be coming out in a watershed plan.
Yes, and those are things, those are things that were pursued by Colby and would be pursued in greater depth by this, the FFB or someone like that. We're coming up with a plan. By far, over 90%, what Colby found and what healthy lakes in general are finding is that the biggest sources of their phosphorus input, which is the problem with things like cyanobacteria and so forth. But mostly over 90% of it is from stormwater runoff. And so that's what already we're working on it with homes that have lawns that run down to water and so forth to get them to put in buffers and so forth. And so we're working with it already, but we've just decided we gotta have the pros come in and help us through this.
And it's also opportune considering the town meeting that we had several months ago about, with Colby Sawyer, talking about runoff and septic tanks and the ordinance about septic tank inspection. So go for it as far as I'm concerned.
So we're just looking for all you people to say, oh, it's a great idea.
Great idea.
One last question, thank you, a great idea, but, is the loan forgiveness, is that part of the terms of the loan, is that guaranteed, or is that kind of the history of this?
Well, it's just guaranteed. Yeah. But you have to have it within a certain time limit,
So as long as you hit.
which is also
Milestones.
negotiable, like if you got, say, 5 years
Mhm.
and, you discovered some major thing, apparently they can extend it another year and so forth. But when you start talking to them, it seems like there's a lot more flexibility built into this. But a 1% loan for 1 or 2 years, I mean, we can't beat that.
No, you can't.
In the vendor, the consultant, talking with, do they have room on their schedule, to take something on in the near term?
I'm sorry?
The consultant you're working with, are
Yeah.
talking about, do they have room on the schedule to take on the project and the new term? Like, when would you see this starting, like, what's the timeline, if the loan would have?
Well, a timeline on this thing, I mean,
I think I'm gonna close discussion because we have a budget we need to review. And
absolutely, I'm sorry.
And I think what we need to do right at this time is I'd like just a motion of support for the pursuit of this loan and the wetlands plan.
I would like to make a motion to support
I was second.
the warrant article that the selectmen have
I was trying to beat Lou.
trying to be.
I was just trying to beat Lou.
Oh, shut.
Reading it. A second.
Jim seconding.
I did actually finally listen to what Chris was saying, and then it's.
Okay,
Okay.
would we all please record our vote by roll call? Cynthia Russis. How do you?
I support this motion.
Aye, who voted?
Background, I. Kim, yes.
Karen Epstein, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Lindsay Warren, yes.
Charles Kelsey, yes.
Chris Florio, yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
Well, thank you guys very much. The only thing I can say is being on this side now,
Yeah.
saying as I'm leaving, is I'm so glad I'm leaving.
What are you trying to say?
You've got quite a year.
We're not under tax base.
Oh,
I haven't been.
Thank you, Richard.
So you're
for your patience. Tom Carly, please come forward and what we will now consider in the presentation of the Tracy Memorial Library budget. You have two worksheets, Excel worksheets, one with larger print, one with smaller print and comments of the same information. And Richard will take us through this, and what I would like us to do is allow the presentation to take place and then hold our questions for the end. I'm very conscious of our time. It's 7:12. We will adjourn at 8 o'clock. I'd also like to introduce Tom Carly, who is the Chair of the Finance Committee of the library. That's representation, Tom, who will join Richard in tonight's discussion. So the floor is yours.
So thank you, Charlie, and thank you all for having me. Again, I'm Richard Tutwiler. I'm the library director in charge of the Tracy Memorial Library. So generally how I'm gonna present this today is I'm gonna go over some relatively higher level, information. Apologies to Charlie and Meg and Lindsay, you've heard this before. But let's go ahead and jump on into it. I know we're running short on time. So the Tracy Memorial Library, what are we? We are a roughly 14,000 square foot building in Tracy, or I'm sorry, in New London. And we were built in 1823. And we are, as of now, the most valuable building that the town of New London owns. And that is a point of distinction that I want to highlight. The building is owned by the town of New London. The Tracy Memorial Library Board of Trustees, of which Tom Carly is the treasurer, they have oversight over the facility. I'm, as the director, will be chief administration officer. You want to put that title to it. Staffing wise, we have 13 staff, four of which are full-time. Includes myself, our assistant director, our head of youth services, our head of circulation. Outside of those four, we have 9 part-time staff. We have 3 of which are regular part-time staff members, which are minimum of 21 hours and have partial benefits, no health insurance or anything like that, but they do accrue leave and sick leave. And then the rest are just full part-time employees that are not benefited whatsoever. So in terms of our operations, we have 3 principal subdivisions of the Board of Trustees. We have the Finance Subcommittee, of which Tom is the head. We have the Facilities Subcommittee, and then the Personnel and Policy Subcommittee. So the Facilities Subcommittee makes recommendations based on, the building needs of where we shall allocate capital reserve monies to the full board. And the Policy and Personnel Subcommittee make determinations on library policies and personnel things like personnel wages. So that's a kind of again, high level brief overview of our, kind of structure. The library has 3 floors to it. So, in terms of staffing the building, generally we have at least 2 members on the ground floor. That's our circulation floor. Our youth services floor is the basement. We generally will have at least 1 person staffing that. And then the upstairs is where administration is housed, in addition to our New Hampshire room. So we have 3 floors, 14,000 square feet. In an emergency, we can maintain the building open to the public with a minimum of 2 employees, but we would not open it with just one for safety reasons. We are open to the public roughly given, winter weather around here, 2,200 hours each year. And in any given hour from incredibly busy times in the summer to the dead of winter where maybe there's not as many people coming, we roughly have 18 members of the public in the building any given hour. All right, so I'm gonna skip past our staff for the interest of time. So some overviews of our current proposed budget, and just to get out ahead of things right now. This budget was approved by the Tracy Library Board of Trustees in September. And it does include a 3% cost of living adjustment for staff. That was based off the Consumer Price Index. The last time I looked at it was around 12 days ago, where it was 3%. So end of September last year to end of September this year. And that also includes a 2.5% step increase. So that may be something that we need to have further discussion on, given what has transpired earlier today. The town appropriation request is $789,618. That is a 4.4% increase over last year. As we kind of go through the numbers, my goal generally is to hit 3 to 5%. That's what I feel comfortable with, in terms of being, mindful of our taxpayers and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Our overall budget is $848,218, which is a 4.7% increase. So that difference is really where Tracy income comes in. I'll get to that in a little bit. Personnel is by far our largest, increase each year. Right now, with the 3% COLA and 2.5% step, we would be looking at a 5.8% increase. But other key increases for this upcoming year would be energy costs. Electricity at 9% is the paramount of them. And then other increases more so that jump out. Downloadables at 26.7. We managed to offset that by moving money around from other types of material. For example, maybe buying less audiovisual DVDs and moving those fund lines into downloadables. For those of you who may not know, downloadables are things that the library would provide access to, like Hoopla, Overdrive, or Canopy, which are streaming services effectively. Each of them has a different system of, kind of how we pay for it. Overdrive, which is our primary, books one, ebooks, we get through the state library, and that is effectively purchasing a copy of a novel that we lease for a given amount of time. Whereas Hoopla is what we would call a cost per circulation model. So that one would be, we have a patron who's really interested in this. They don't need to wait for it. They can check it out right away and read it, watch it, listen to it. But we would encumber those costs immediately. It wouldn't be leased with a certain amount of copies that could be, weighted on, like a traditional physical book would be. For capital reserve this year, we are not requesting a transfer of monies into the library building maintenance line. We would request a disbursement of $85,000 for parking area improvements and fixes. That number has come up in question because it's a large number. Ultimately, that number was decided before my time with the previous director and the facility subcommittee, looking at vendors and generally what it would cost. We had some discussions at the facility subcommittee for the library earlier, kind of looking at that number, and please correct me. We noticed that one of the churches that Tom is affiliated with, they recently redid their parking lot. I think it was $250,000. Ultimately, whatever we would move forward with, we would go through a competitive bid process to keep that number as down as we can. The reason that we would not ask for any additional transfer into that line is right now we're sitting pretty with the $200,000 disbursement from last year. Thanks to some coming under budget on other projects, I was able to secure a $15,000 grant. We have more money currently sitting in the library building maintenance line than we had originally asked for last year. So that's why we're not asking for an additional transfer. So our total expected library income, which again, this is the non-town appropriation, is expected to increase to 9.7%. So we're expecting a 9.7% increase in Tracy income over last year. That's due to favorable Tracy Trust income receipts. We're doing well. Okay, so in terms of our budget disbursement percentages, again, personnel is the lion's share of our costs, simply is. That sits at 75.6% of our operating budget. Materials, which again are books, DVDs, our access to online services, that is 6.6% of our budget. Supplies is 1.4% of our budget. Equipment is 3.3% of our budget. That would be things like replacement computers, and, we recently ordered a new server to replace our end of life one at the end of last year. Programs are 0.4%. Maintenance, which again, we are a historic building and we do want to make sure that we are offsetting large spikes in costs for maintaining the building by having a regular recurring maintenance schedule. That is 11.1%. That includes our grounds. This past year, we had a higher than expected grounds cost because I'm sure many of you remember we had that freezing ice storm and we lost an elm tree. Thanks to our public works department, we were able to replace it. And it just went into the ground earlier this month. Travel is 0.6%. This would really be for staff members and board of trustee members going to outside conferences, travel fees associated with that. And then other at 0.7%, which is kind of a catch-all of, paying for a bookkeeper, paying for the auditing process that we go through each year. So the library recently completed a strategic plan. So to go over our strategic plan focus areas, and again, this is what's really going to define over the 5 to 10 years, whether we prioritize our spending and our resources and our manpower. Expanding outreach efforts and partnership building, improving the library facility inside and out, increasing marketing and awareness, innovating library programming and services. So that all sounds good. What is the budget impact of those things? Well, first off, we prioritize building maintenance to extend life of the building and prevent large capital project expenditures. Number two, we be efficient with our funds to market and get out into the library or into the community. Build and promote partnerships to keep costs manageable. Again, let's leverage word of mouth rather than just putting an ad out in the shopper, which is not cheap. There's ways that you can build awareness of library resources and services and programs that don't necessarily have to have a cost associated with them. Develop new ways of engaging patrons through programs and services. What else can we offer? Utilizing Friends of the Library funding, which is the cherry on top of our funding. They provide extra to us. They would not add anything for our regular operating budget, but they are a resource that we can use to provide additional services. For example, this past year, we added a video game collection that the Friends paid for. It was not funded with taxpayer dollars, but it still provides things for the town of New London residents that maybe we could add on to. Moving forward into the coming year, what I'd really love to do is add a tool library. That's something that's important to me if we can make it work. And really, it's a question of finances and space. Like pretty much every municipal building, space is at a premium. And just in brief again, I want to be mindful of time and give you all plenty of time for questions. For 2024, just kind of going over some of our statistics. We had 2,102 cardholders. We had 37,813 visits to the library. Our physical circulation, which again are physical books that we have in our collection, circulated 73,413 times. For our digital circulation, it was 20,539 times. Our collection is roughly 40,000 physical pieces of material. We had 133 youth programs, 2,658 attendees of those youth programs. We had 75 teen programs with 366 attendees, and 41 adult programs, which had 313 attendees. So those are things, particularly teens, we definitely want to prioritize moving forward. One of our larger, hopes in the coming years is to be able to go out with a capital campaign and rebuild the library to have a designated teen space that actually provides an avenue for those individuals to have a space that they feel a sense of ownership for. One thing that breaks my heart every day when I see the kids get off the school buses, they go run over to Dunkin' Donuts. And that's great. I love Dunkin' Donuts too, but we want them coming into the library instead. So in my past, really what's been helpful is having what's called a teen leadership council. You get them invested in the library. Again, you build a space for them to call their own, give them the responsibility of kind of managing that space and sometimes the behavior of their colleagues. And then you can really build year over year, engagement from that group. The elder teens teach the younger teens, and that cycle continues each year. So I'll kind of end there for our kind of higher level overview and get back to the actual budget. So as I mentioned earlier, the Board of Selectmen met earlier today and they suggested a 1.5% COLA. Should the Board of Selectmen choose to pursue that and lower our request, that would be a roughly $6,125 reduction in the appropriation request. That's just quick math I did right before this meeting with my calculator, so give me some time to double check those numbers, but generally that's what we would be looking to lower. If we reduced the appropriation request to that number, it would fall from 4.4% to 3.5% of an increase over last year. I'll just kind of open it up to questions. I'm sure you will have many, and again, I want to be mindful of time.
Thank you. Questions, for Richard or Tom?
I can do both.
Sure.
So when you're talking about the parking lot, so I know that the space across the street is owned by the town.
That is correct.
So is that the one that you're referring to, or just?
This would just be the little parking lot in front of the building.
Okay.
So it would be repaving that
Mhm.
area, restriping the parking. We've had discussions about whether or not one handicap space is adequate for the amount of users that we have. Unfortunately, I think if we were to add an additional handicap spot, if we want to make both sides wheelchair accessible, we could not do that with our current space.
Mm.
So realistically, we would have to keep 2 regular parking spots and 1 handicap parking spot. But in addition, it would be going over and redoing all the curbing. Bless our people's hearts, sometimes they slam into those curbs, and they're in rough shape. And the town, we're very thankful that they help us by plowing, but the plows sometimes hit the curbs, so they're in quite a state of disrepair.
My next one, so the space that you have for gatherings. So we know that like local real estate companies, et cetera, will use that space. Is there a charge for that? Is that a source of income?
That there is no charge for that now. The meeting room can only be used for, civic-minded engagements. We do not allow for-profits to utilize that space. It is, it is a.
Yeah, for the good of the community.
Yeah, for the good of the community. But outside of that, we do not charge for it. Now, it is a bipartisan space. We allow people from both political persuasions to utilize that space equally. Again, so long as they are free and open to the public.
Okay.
And we don't charge overdue fees.
Yeah, we do not charge overdue fees.
And Colin's got one of our books back.
All right, those are my questions.
Sure.
I have a quick one and then I'll,
Please.
because, yeah, we met, for sure. So some of the things I'm gonna say is just, like, I'm noticing your repair and upkeep margins from 2021 used 55% of 20 grand. 2022 used 74% of 25,000. I'm not saying you specifically.
Sure.
23, 55%, it dropped last year in 2024, the amount did, I think. But, yeah, and you, yeah, and then it's the same, but you're not using it, but that's kind of what I wish, you know, it's allocated for, and I'm not saying your board of trustees clearly is doing a wonderful job. I just wish that we had a more consistent cost of operations laid out clearly for our buildings so that we don't have catastrophic response to police station, police station, police station. Oh, the highway department fell. I mean, and that happens. I mean, it's going to happen. I just wish we had a little bit more transparency and we're paying a little bit more attention overall rather than just capital reserve or subcommittees or whatever to the actual cost of doing business and or not business, you know, having a library and then kind of equalizing that more over time rather than, oh, we have this fund here and we have this grant fund here. And that's awesome, all of them. But what does it cost? And that's where I personally just wish we had a, you know, overall on it. What do things actually cost is what I want to know.
It's difficult.
Yeah, oh, I get it.
Yeah, it's something.
I'd say the maintenance actual is a random walk. You can be up one year, down next
The
year.
house of-
Stuff breaks and you gotta replace it. So it's almost impossible to accurately estimate what it's gonna be.
No, but all the more reason to use what you've already estimated in a calendar year, a little bit more to defer some of these, or not defer, but to actually not have some like, you know, upkeep, maintenance, kind of, let's just keep chipping away until, you know, so a big chip of the building doesn't fall off.
Sure.
Well, I'd say our facilities committee has done an excellent job the last couple of years of getting on top of it. They hired Frank Anzalone. He did a study of the building. We fixed the roof. We're in the process of fixing the exterior. There's not deferred maintenance anymore.
No, 0% criticism. I just want to make sure that we're, you
Yeah,
know, it's a lot of work to schedule all that too. Don't get me wrong, and you've got to find the people. I just want to make sure that we're adequately taking care of what we already have and keeping it before it becomes a bigger, because it's only gonna get more expensive.
Sure.
So
No,
that's,
we
but
definitely-
no, and I hope you don't, you know, obviously, yeah, thank you so much. I'm just saying like existentially perhaps.
No, we definitely try to do our best to kind of value add, you know, some of responsibilities for building maintenance. To that point earlier today, I went up the elevator and went into the bottom of it because there was a smell of oil. I had to figure out why is that. And well, there was some oil on there. That's why it smelled like oil. It's not terrifying. You never know. It's just a false elevator. But that's what you have to do when you're a small time library director. I replaced the toilet myself last year.
I've done too. I mean,
So-
yeah,
I've
I'm
done that in my house.
negating that. I'm just saying, yeah, like included expenses, like
Who met with Public Works?
use them.
I did.
I was going to say, I think. Hold your beer, because I think when Sam comes, you're gonna hear all about the plan for
It is
maintenance.
hell.
Well, I think it represents an opportunity because I think for the library to optimize the resources that might be available from the Department of Public Works, if not just the intellectual capital. In a more effective manner because the relationship's there, but the capability, competence and willingness is also there.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think that's a tribute to Sam and a tribute to the direction you were heading.
No, we were able to save a good amount of money by having Sam and his public works team install that tree that again went in earlier this month.
We may plow our parking lot too.
Yeah, so we definitely have a great relationship. Sam's fantastic. You know, what we can do, we want to, you know, take care of, you know, last year I was out there cleaning up all the branches from that free storm that we had, dragging them. I threw my back out. But Sam came and picked them all up, which means we didn't have to pay to have somebody remove it. So it's definitely, you know, there's a synergetic, is that the right word? Sorry, it's the synergistic relationship that we have, and we're very appreciative of them.
We knew what you were saying.
Chris,
I have just, I have like a few questions. Some are educational for me. Some are maybe you can just answer like one
Sure.
word. Does the, obviously, most of your, costs come from salary, right? Salary and benefits, so like 76%. Do part-time folks get step COLA as well as full-time?
They do. The only exclusion to that would be, we do have one temporary staff member who only just fills in when, you know, people are on vacation and we can't offset that with, either me covering those hours or one of the other full-time members. So that person does not get, step increases.
Okay. I know you've mentioned the number of visitors. Do you know, and if you don't, it's fine, it's just a random question. Do you know the number of visitors that are new versus recurring? Is
It's,
there a way to track that?
there's
Just
no
to
way
say
to-
like who's, you know, to your point of children coming, especially in digital age, and that's only growing, right? Like, have you seen yourself more kids, or do you see sort of the same folks that continue to come into the library?
So that's an interesting question. Just to give a kind of, excuse my voice. We do have a door counter, so that's where we put numbers. Thank you.
I have not opened.
Yeah.
Take it off. Thank you. So we do have a door counter, and that's what we build those numbers based off of. To your point of like, have you seen youth engagement more? One of the things that we saw starting last year, particularly in the fall, was quite a significant drop in circulation, and we were like, why is that? So we crunched the numbers and, you know, found out, well, the teenagers aren't checking out as many books as they used to. So we thought, why is that? Well, the reason why that was is the school stopped dropping the kids off where they could walk into the library. So we saw a huge chunk of our regular engagement disappear. You know, so I got on the horn with them and, you know, had some good productive conversations, and they started dropping the kids off near us again, and our numbers have gone back up. It's hard for me to give you like a firm.
No. I'm just, again, more curious because obviously patronage, right? If you have the same people coming in over and over, hopefully you said you have at least thinking of a plan to attract teens. Good luck with that. I mean, as a father of a teen, my kids loved the library when they were kids. They think that's the age where they're just like getting the video games and the TikTok. And,
Why I said let's break.
right? Which I guess goes back to one of the other, at least thought, I'm sure you guys have thought about this, is that the money that we spend on periodicals and books seem to, you know, be a little bit down, which is great, versus the downloadables, which is up, which I think is good, right? Because I think to attract that's where more people are going. I'm ignorant to outside of like I have an Audible account and things like that, but it sounds like I'm sure you've sourced how to get the most downloadables for our budget, right? Like I know you said you have is it a state program or
So
is that something that's private that you
We do have a state program, so we pay into that state program. It is based off of usage and amount of users in a given municipality. I think for this upcoming year, I got the bill earlier this month. I think it's around $5,000 for the year. Hoopla is, again, that's one where it's a cost per circulation model. And that's very different. It means the cost can go up and down based on how popular it is. What I will say about that is people love it because it's instant, it's on demand, and they have over 100,000 different items in their collection, all of which we provide access to. For budget management, it is a hungry beast. I've worked at 3 different library systems where all of us have had to kind of look at that with a very clear lens of, you know, this is taking up a bigger chunk of our budget each year. At which point do we kind of draw the line? And for some of that, it's by lowering the amount of times we allow a patron to check something out, because again, we're encumbering those costs. But then it's also maybe lowering, like we don't allow them to check out the $7 thing. They can only check out the $4 and under thing. It's a way to offset our costs also, while still providing as much as we can.
Okay.
I'm sorry, how much are you spending on Hoopla right now?
I'd have to pull out the specific numbers. I'd say it's probably around $12,000, probably around $1,000 a year.
And the state program, is that Libby?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
That's
I use Libby all the time. So is that more or less, because that's an entire state of New Hampshire
Mhm.
access. So is that more cost effective?
It's far more cost effective.
Okay.
It 100% is. The drawback is that you have to wait for that item the same as everybody else in New Hampshire. Again, you're not only competing with people in your municipality, you're competing with everybody in New Hampshire that contributes to that system. So
Yeah, but you can put 5 on hold at any time, so, you know, you just gotta balance them.
Just my last question is, no, don't be sorry. It's, I know you're shooting for 3% increase year over year, right? Because we talked about budgets and unsustainability, and if we go by pure math in 5 or 6 years past, right? If I look at the budget's increased 28.6%, which 6 years from now would be 1.1 million, that might be fine. That might be the right dollar amount. Is that, I guess, are you guys looking for ways to get down to that 3%? I know it's a idea, but sort of what is the thought process for reducing potential future costs, especially since most of it comes from salary and benefits?
sure, and unfortunately, we don't have too crazy of an amount of control over that. What Tom and I have really done is taken an approach of how do we make our Tracy income, how do we grow that piece of the pie? Because there's some things that we can control, you know, we can control our spending, but we can't necessarily control, you know, what the cost of COLA is. Although, you know, that's a whole other discussion point. So we kind of aggressively, and you know, I give Tom and Joe Cubitt and the rest of the trustees of the trust all the credit for this. You know, we went aggressive with our Tracy Trust income. And that's why we've seen those dollar amounts rise up dramatically. We looked at or grant income. How can the library, even if it's not something in our operating budget, how can we offset what our taxpayers are paying each year? And, you know, and I found a $15,000 grant to offset our construction costs today. And that's $15,000 that is not going to come out of the capital reserve for library building maintenance. So we definitely are mindful of our costs, and we are doing what we can to keep them down. Again, 3 to 5%, that's a target.
Sure.
But the best thing that we can do is really keeping in mind that we are a service, you know, we are a service. We're not income generating, but where we can to grow our income so that we're offsetting our town operation each year.
Okay, thank you.
So quick, like, again, don't worry why I'm at, I just, really quick, what was the total attendance or like average per year of library users per se?
Let me pull that out.
There's a reason why I'm open.
So we had 2,102 card holders.
Okay,
I can tell you we've already, that was for the end of 2024. We've already gone up past that.
so you're spending basically 12,000 on Hoopla. And each card member is an average of $5.70 per card. So my question is like, is it worth it? Or do we just say, hey, Audible's $9.99 for you taxpayer? Or Libby,
Just
or whatever.
Libby.
Yeah, it's just a weird, I'm just asking, that's all. Like, those are the kind of numbers. If I'm gonna be like squidgy about, I'm like, I don't know, why, does it work? Like, does it make sense?
People love it though. That's.
Oh,
That's the thing. People love it.
that is the other half. There is the what are we doing this for? And so I get it. I'm just asking, like, is that if Libby's more efficient or something like that, you know?
No, it's, the last library I worked at, we had a $6.7 million budget. I can tell you, we had to have some serious conversations about the cost of Hoopla because
Yeah.
people love it. It's on demand. I get to read whatever I want or listen to whatever I want. Right now, I don't have to wait in line. It's great. Yeah.
Again,
I'm popping on a flight and I want to listen to this audiobook, bam, I'm good to go. It's great. But it does come with a cost. You know, there's no free lunch.
we don't provide YouTube premium to everybody.
No, we don't.
Well, we also don't provide
Yeah.
Audible, like, you know, it sounds like town paid Audible.
I was just asking.
Yeah, no, I know,
Yeah.
this is the first I'm hearing about it, so.
Lou?
Yeah, question. Recently you guys installed a standby generator.
Mhm.
Are you doing it's early maintenance on it, or that you're, you know, like, where is it reflected? Like,
So that just would be under our regular.
regular, okay,
Yeah,
so.
repairs and upkeep. It's one of those line items in
Okay.
there. We've had
Question
no
on that
problems
one
with it so
is,
far.
how much of the library would be still functioning if you have a major power outage?
My understanding is the entirety of the building.
Okay, good. So you're,
It's come on a handful of times, like for 2 or 3 seconds at a moment. But honestly, there's not been enough time for me to get out of my chair before the power comes back.
oh,
on.
yeah,
We
it's
go off
pretty
the-
awesome.
Oh, that's it.
Quick couple of questions, if I may, in the committee. Tom, you could help with this. There's a trust fund of
$600,000.
$600,000. That trust fund is restricted in its use, meaning,
Only the dividend and the interest income can be paid out of there. Any capital gains remain there. That's why it's going from, it was $50,000 back when Mrs. Tracy started the library to 600 today. So it's compound, but now we can only get the dividends.
dividend and interest income from that. Additionally, the garden is a separate, Tracy Garden is a separate entity. And its costs associated costs are borne from a pot of money that they have available and whoever the they is.
I think they're a 501c.
They do their own
money.
fundraising.
They get no money from us. It's all generated internally from the garden.
they have a separate deed?
It's still technically library property, but the operation of it, the flowers, they have a very robust volunteer, group of volunteers that come in. I had the privilege last week of attending their end of year luncheon, which they graciously invited me to, and it was fantastic to see so many people, really give back to the library and build something absolutely beautiful.
So the asset of a shed that sits in the garden or nearby it, that asset is owned by the library, not by the garden.
It is owned by the library. Yes, we have responsibility for.
Thus your projection of $20,000 roof repair cost in the out years here is, for that reason, it's a library asset.
Yeah, as we were earlier going through the roof replacement for the library, they kind of pointed out, that roof is not in the best of shape. Now, it does not get significant usage by members of the public. It's really just for, we don't want a safety hazard, of course, but it's mostly used for storage, so it's less of a priority item for us, but it's something that we do want to be mindful of.
Relative to your staff, you are now a year plus into the role. You came from previous libraries. You've looked at local libraries. Our staffing at the FTE levels that they are today, is that staffing right?
I think it's sufficient.
Sufficient?
Yeah, I think,
Is it, the question obviously I'm coming to is there opportunity in your staffing levels for a budget adjustment?
that is a challenging thing for me to answer, and I'll point to the consistent feedback that I get from members of the community, which is, why aren't you open more?
Mhm.
And that's because, our staffing allows us to operate this amount of hours and, do so in such a manner where we have 3 floors that are manned and are, it is safe. That is something that we need to be mindful of. I have worked at other libraries where unfortunately I have lost employees because if somebody had a heart attack and they were, on the other side of the building where nobody knew that they were there, and they died, and it was awful. So I'm very mindful that we need staff members who are checking in on each other. There is a bare minimum of staff that we need in the building, both in terms of just public safety, but then, of course, the services that we are offering.
The nice thing is with the mix between full-time and part-time, we don't incur any overtime. That's not an issue for the library.
That's an excellent point. Security system. Do you have a security system within the library? And it is a distinct, separate entity of system.
That's correct.
Okay. So there is, for example, separate system at Whipple, separate system for this building, there's a separate system for police, and I think one of the considerations maybe and recommendations could be that we look at a universal security system for all our assets versus having individual one-offs, both for cost, leveraging, and optimization of security.
And to speak plainly, I love that because honestly, I hate getting the calls at 3 o'clock in the morning that, you know, it randomly decided not to communicate. Well, it's not even the alarms going off, it's just that one of the switches in one of the building pieces, you know, didn't communicate with the master system for whatever reason, and
Yeah. Okay.
I get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's fine, it's part of the job, but
Less than ideal.
not ideal.
There is a more comprehensive report that Lindsay, Meg, and I are in the final stages of completing that will be distributed to the committee. So there'll be additional information that much of which you articulated already that can help inform how we think about library going forward and continue to. So are there any additional questions?
Can I ask a quick question if you can hear me?
Yes, please.
Just so curious about the usage of the meeting room. What you're seeing about how that space is utilized, and also the fact that you only allow nonprofits or civic-minded groups as opposed to perhaps allowing for-profit groups that would consider paying for the space as a source of revenue. Just don't know if that's been a topic in the past as well.
So it's not been a topic of conversation at this library. However, I do have the privilege of having worked at other libraries where that was, you know, a thing. Unfortunately, when that happens, in communities like New London, there is not enough meeting room spaces to meet the demands of the public. So then it becomes a competition between who's willing to pay more for that privilege. And the nonprofits cannot, they can't meet that expectation. So it would be challenging for me to move in that direction, noting how many people within our community really rely on that space for building awareness of their MPOs.
So the utilization is very high, in other words, that you feel you don't have the extra space, even if you were to sort of create an allocation system that took in mind the fairness piece of that versus the revenue generating potential.
It would be a challenge. I'd say right now our utilization is probably 75% of the time there's a group or a program in there. I try to be a good steward to other community organizations, including, you know, the town.
We're trying.
We're trying. We do have another space that we allow access to, not for reservation, but, you know, generally you need special permission to utilize it, which would be our New Hampshire room that's upstairs. You know, we'll do that for special events, or like if the town needs something, I will make that space available for them. But generally, we do not make it available to other groups. Just it's for quiet study of our patrons. We don't like to take that space away.
Thank you. Just trying to learn a little more about it. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Rich, you had a question?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm just curious in terms of when you talk about circulation and the different types of media, et cetera. What sort of trend lines are you seeing? Like, are you seeing, for example, books? Are they flat? Are they declining? Are they increasing? When you look at, say, the last 5 years, what sort of trends are you seeing?
So it's interesting for libraries because generally when the economy is not doing so hot, the library's doing great. It's kind of inversely related. For New London, you know, looking over the past 5 years, again, outside of this past fall where we saw a little bit of a dip, during the pandemic, people weren't going out. Our online usage skyrocketed. It continues to grow. Our physical circulation declined. And then as we came out of the pandemic, we're back up to pre-pandemic levels, and we're starting again to be on that higher trajectory. So all of our numbers are going up each year. But, the pandemic took a lot of, wind out of our sails, if you will, and it took a while. It took 3 or 4 years to get back to where we were before that happened. Obviously, New London has, it has an aging population. People are much more worried, for good reason, during the pandemic. Completely understand.
So that's encouraging. So it sounds like though, across the board, it sounds like if I'm understanding, you're saying that the trend lines in all the different media are increasing. And is that on a per patron basis or just because we're increasing the number of patrons?
I'm not sure if it's on I've not pulled those numbers myself. I know all of our circulation numbers, whether digital, physical, or patron visits, they're all up, which is great. In terms of percentage increases, our downloadables are, quite a bit higher in terms of it's going up more than the other ones are. But on a per user basis, I'd have to run those.
And the other question I have is regarding staff. Are you having any difficulty filling positions?
We are fully filled at the moment. So at this point, no. We did have some challenges with our collection development specialist this past year. We have a longtime employee leave for a better opportunity, which is great. We filled the position with a very qualified candidate who worked with us for a couple months, and then unfortunately, the personal life crisis happened. They had to move out of the area. We filled that with our next candidate up, and she's still in that position. And we do not have any open positions right now.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report and presentation in your time. And also the efforts you're making on behalf of the town as well. If any other questions arise from the committee, please direct them to me. I will transfer them to Richard. And we'll receive those answers back and I will distribute them out to the committee. Any public input? Bob, do you have anything you would like to?
I don't. I love the library and I'm glad to see that they're doing really well. And I hope you will support them 100% in anything there.
Yeah, I will say there's no greater love affair when it comes to civic mindedness than the love affair between New Englanders as their library.
Transfer station.
Yeah. Well, but when you look at up until actually the 1960s, I was just reading sometime, there were more public libraries in Coats County than in the entirety of many southern states. And that's the way that New England was formed. And first thing the Puritans did when they established the Boston Latin and they set up a public library system. And congratulations.
Yeah, it is an honor to serve.
Thank you, Bob. Yes.
I just want to add an historical note. When I was on the board, the Tracy Garden was in fact getting funding for what they did, which we had real questions budget-wise as to why that would occur. And it was a little bit of a difficult conversation, but we convinced them to form a 501c3 and raise their own money. And I think they've been happier ever since because they don't have to have a conversation with the library about can we put in another food sheet.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the library was happier and it's worked out wonderfully.
I just stay out of their way. They do a fantastic job.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. I'd like a motion to adjourn from this.
I'm so moved.
Second, we need to record this. Bruce's.
I agree to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
I have to say,
Yes.
I'm gonna give you a ride home with that. Lindsay, like, yes.
Yes,
Take
Charlie.
care.
Yes.
Yeah, move, yeah.
Chris, yes.
All
So,
right. Thank you all for your time.
thank you. Does this replace the thing in China on,
I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if there are changes.
You know what, they're a little different, so I'm just gonna keep both.
I made some comments,
Progressing.
Jay, about some of the words in it, that I thought was like a huge contradiction,
Yeah.
and he acknowledged it. I may have corrected it in a second.
All right, I'll just leave one in front.
Thank you.
Well, we didn't.
Oh, no, that's awful. Who's got strep?
Go ahead.
Oh, I had a cold from hell.
Last night, Cynthia and I were.
And-
Keep like do that. I'll,
Two days ago.
No, everyone's off. I could have changed about it. Saturday for. Okay, well. Yeah, kind of jacked, but I was traveling.
You're like, where did I go?
Like, I've been so much travel on. Which. It mattered, yeah, Eric told about it, when I came back.
And you drove here, if you don't have any. For me, you know, since I have asthma, it's because I'm old. So I had a call that last. I mean, it was 3 weeks and I was. Now, finally, I'm better. Well.